The Home Secretary absolutely is devoted to dealing with unlawful and illegal migration, and she's working hard to try and do that. But I think, remembering that we're part of a team here that should be driven by a collective responsibility to each other and to the country will allow us to focus on getting on with the job rather than making speeches that are at best being misinterpreted or at worst being seen as some sort of agenda that frankly helps nobody. I see a Conservative Party in Parliament and outside of the country that is still fizzing with ideas. There is huge ambition to govern this country wisely in the national interest, to deal with the issues that people are talking about, which is our overstretched health service, issues relating to the price of food and pressures on family life. And if we deal with those issues, as the Prime Minister set out in his 5 priorities, then the Conservative Party will be shown to be in touch with the aspirations of the people of our country. Right. That's what we need to be focusing on, not trying to look ahead to 2025. And frankly, a party that doesn't have the privilege of serving in government is able to do nothing. And anybody who's contemplating defeat, or worse still, planning for it, should grow up or get out.
Well, that is a very blunt message to the Home Secretary: grow up or get out. And when you talk about self-fulfilling prophecies, you mean that this kind of airing of potential difficulties and differences, that makes a defeat at the next election more likely?
Well, it doesn't help, does it? Because the Prime Minister has clearly set out priorities that I think chime with the British people. Taming inflation is the way in which we will deal with the cost of living crisis. It will offer relief and support to millions of households and businesses up and down our country. It will help with pay and wage settlements that have been so difficult over the last few months. Previous Conservative governments understood that you have to slay the dragon of inflation in order to be credible on the economy. That's what this Prime Minister is trying to do. I'm giving him my absolute support, as I think the vast majority of Conservatives are, and his other priorities to grow the economy, to reduce debt as a share of GDP, and to deal with health backlogs, and yes, to stop those boats. Those are priorities, I think, that chime with the British people. The Home Secretary absolutely is devoted to dealing with unlawful and illegal migration, and she's working hard to try and do that. But I think, remembering that we're part of a team here that should be driven by a collective responsibility to each other and to the country will allow us to focus on getting on with the job rather than making speeches that are at best being misinterpreted or at worst being seen as some sort of agenda that frankly helps nobody.
All right. As I say, pretty plain and blunt stuff. Grow up or get out.
The Migrancy Advisory Committee, which gives advice to the government about what gaps there are in the market, should be listened to. And then as a result of their advice, the government then can open up visas in order to allow these jobs to be filled. Now, if that means that, a large number of people are coming at the moment, I think, the choice we make is either we want a growing economy, we want inflation, particularly food inflation, to come down, which it will do if we have a better supply of food that's picked in our fields and crops and livestock that are raised on our farms, or we say, well, actually, we don't want that, and we're chasing some mythical figure. And instead of including students in the figure, let's disaggregate them, because most of them go back anyway after their studies. Focus on those who are staying here and overstaying their visas. Focus on, and I agree with the Home Secretary on this, the number of families that seem to be coming over as well at the moment, and try and deal with these problems, bit by bit. There isn't one overwhelming poetic answer to these issues, but I do think that an element of realism and practicality needs to come into play here.
An element of reason and practicality. So the Home Secretary is being unreasonable and impractical. There are those who suggest that Suella Braverman...
Well, realism, I meant realism.
Realism. So more realism there. So she's unrealistic. So there are those who say Suella Braverman here is angling for a position of strength inside the Conservative Party, even that she sees herself as a future leader, even that's the dream after the next election, which sort of implies an election defeat. Do you share that view of Suella Braverman's real agenda here?
Well, I hope not. We've got a leader. Rishi Sunak is our prime minister, and we want him to lead the party into the next election, win that election with a united, strong team around him. I think anybody who is playing politics of that nature, or is even perceived to be playing politics of that nature, better deal with that very quickly in order to dispel, what could be a self-fulfilling prophecy here.